Have you ever noticed that the guy catching the biggest fish on the lake is usually the one standing in the freezing wind while everyone else is going home? It makes zero sense, right? Your grandfather probably taught you that when a massive spring cold front rolls in, the fish simply turn off. You pack your bags, turn on the heater in your truck, and wait for a warm sunny day. But what if I told you that by running away from the bad weather, you are actually running away from the best bite of the entire year? Today, we are going to talk about whether you are fishing on the wrong side of a massive spring cold front. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will completely change the way you look at a nasty weather forecast. We are going to uncover the brutal truth about why your usual spots look like a desert when the temperature drops, and exactly what you need to do to fix it. So, let me ask you a question. Are you ready to stop making excuses about the cold wind and start catching the fish of a lifetime? Let us dive right in. Let us set the stage here. Early spring fishing is incredibly unpredictable. One day you are fishing in a t-shirt, and the next day you need a heavy winter coat. This is the reality of the spring cold front. For generations, fishermen have been told that a sudden drop in water temperature is the ultimate kiss of death for fishing. It is a belief that has been passed down for decades. You go to the local tackle shop, and you hear the same complaints every single year. The old guys drink their coffee and say the bite is dead because the wind shifted. Because of this deeply rooted habit, 99% of fishermen do exactly the same thing. They fish the same spots, with the same fast-moving lures, and when they do not get a bite after an hour, they blame the weather and go home. But the truth is, the fish are still there. They did not sprout legs and walk out of the lake. Their behavior simply changed, and they moved. The problem is not the fish, and it is not even the weather. The problem is that most anglers refuse to adapt to the conditions. They keep forcing a warm weather strategy on a cold weather reality. Let us talk about the concept of the wrong side of the cold front. First, there is the chronological side. The biggest mistake you can make is missing the prefrontal bite. Picture this. You are standing on the edge of the water. The sky is getting incredibly dark, and the wind is just starting to howl against your face. You can feel the air pressure dropping rapidly. Most guys look at those dark clouds and start walking back to their trucks to avoid getting rained on. But under the water, an absolute frenzy is happening. The fish can feel that severe barometric pressure change in their lateral lines. Their survival instinct kicks into high gear. They know a massive period of bad weather is about to hit, which means food might be hard to find for the next few days. So, what do? They eat absolutely everything in sight. If you leave the lake right before the storm hits, you are missing the most aggressive bite of the week. You are quite literally leaving the dinner table right as the main course is being served. Now, let us flip the script and talk about the geographical wrong side of the front. Let us say you actually stayed on the lake during the terrible weather. The wind is blasting and the water is getting choppy. Human nature tells you to find a quiet, calm cove. You want to hide out of the wind so you can cast easier and stay warm. You find a nice quiet spot on the leeward side of the lake where the water is perfectly still. You cast your lure out, wait for a bite, and absolutely nothing happens. Why? Because you are fishing on the wrong side of the lake. That howling cold wind is actually pushing all the microscopic food and bait fish toward the windward banks. And where the bait goes, the big predatory fish follow. It might be miserable to stand there with the wind violently blowing right into your face, causing your eyes to water, but that is exactly where the feeding fish are stacked up. Hiding from the wind is comfortable for you, but it is terrible for your catch rate. Let us debunk another massive myth right now. The myth of the deep water escape. When the severe cold front finally passes through and drops the water temperature by 5 or 6 degrees, guys always assume the fish swam all the way out to the deepest, darkest part of the lake. You will see boats hovering over deep water channels, dragging heavy baits across the bottom for hours with no luck. Here is a real-life scenario. You are sitting on your boat, staring at the sonar, looking for any sign of life in 30 feet of water. But the screen is totally empty. That is because the fish did not go to the middle of the lake. In the spring, fish are highly motivated to stay shallow because they are preparing to spawn. A cold front will not make them abandon their shallow territory entirely. Instead of moving deep, they simply lock down into the thickest, nastiest shallow cover they can find. They bury themselves in thick grass, deep inside fallen trees, or directly under boat docks. They are still shallow, but they are hiding. Knowing that the fish are hiding in shallow cover changes your entire approach. This is where lure selection becomes completely critical. Before the front came in, you were probably throwing fast-moving baits. You were covering water with spinner baits, crankbaits, and topwater lures, getting reaction strikes from aggressive fish. But now, the water is cold, and the pressure is extremely high. Imagine throwing a tennis ball past a sleeping dog. The dog is not going to chase it. That is exactly what happens when you throw a fast lure past a post-frontal fish. They are lethargic, their metabolism has slowed down, and they are not willing to burn energy chasing a fast meal. You have to put away the fast stuff immediately. This is the exact moment you need to switch to slow-moving, bottom-bouncing baits. You need a jig or a soft plastic worm. You have to present the bait right in front of their nose and leave it there until they simply cannot resist taking a bite out of pure annoyance. This brings us to the psychological torture of post-frontal fishing. It is the morning after the storm. You step out of your house, and the sky is a stunning clear blue. There is not a single cloud in the sky. The air is crisp and completely still. It feels like the perfect day to be alive and out in nature. But any experienced fisherman will tell you that a post-frontal bluebird sky is the ultimate nightmare. The barometric pressure is incredibly high. The fish have a headache. They are full from eating before the storm, and they want nothing to do with your bait. You cast your line out into the crystal clear water. The sun is reflecting off the surface, and the silence is deafening. Hours go by without a single tap on your line. It is incredibly easy to doubt yourself in this moment. You start thinking the lake has no fish. You start thinking your lures are the wrong color. The mental game is the hardest part. You have to remind yourself that the fish are still there. They just require extreme patience. So, how do you beat the bluebird sky curse? You have to understand how fish react to intense sunlight after a cold front. Fish do not have eyelids. When that bright, high-pressure sun hits the shallow water, it hurts their eyes. They are going to seek out shade like their life depends on it. Imagine you are walking through a hot desert, and you finally find a single tree with a dark shadow. You are going to stand exactly in that shadow. Fish do the exact same thing. You need to look for very specific shadow lines on the water. A shadow cast by a dock, a shadow from a large boulder, or even the shadow of an overhanging tree branch on the bank. If you cast your bait right into the sunny part of the water, you are wasting your time. You have to pitch your jig exactly into the darkest part of that shadow. Even if the shadow is only 2 feet wide, I guarantee you there is a fish parked right in the middle of it, waiting for an easy meal to drift slowly by. Let us talk about retrieve speed, because this is where 90% of anglers fail miserably after a cold front. When I say you need to fish slow, I mean painfully, agonizingly slow. Let me paint a picture for you. You cast your soft plastic worm out near a submerged log. Normally you might hop it back to the shore with a steady rhythm. Bump, bump, pause. Bump, bump, pause. If you do that after a massive temperature drop, you will catch absolutely nothing. You need to cast it out, let it sink all the way to the muddy bottom, and just let it sit there. Take a deep breath. Look at the trees. Count to 20. Then move your rod tip maybe 1 single inch, just enough to make the bait quiver in the mud. Then stop again. You are trying to mimic a dying piece of prey that is barely clinging to life. The fish is watching it closely. It does not want to chase, but if it looks easy enough, it will eventually inhale it. Fishing this slow requires immense mental discipline, but it is the only way to get a bite. While we are dragging bait slowly, we must talk about forcing a reaction strike. Sometimes the fish are so heavily locked down in the cover that even a slow presentation will not work. They are completely glued to the bottom of a tree trunk, refusing to eat out of hunger. This is where you have to change your mindset. You are no longer trying to feed the fish. You are trying to make the fish angry. Imagine someone poking you in the shoulder repeatedly while you are trying to sleep. Eventually, you are going to swing your arm out of pure frustration. You can do this with a heavy jig. You cast it directly into the thickest branches of a fallen tree. As you pull it through, do not just guide it around the wood. Intentionally crash the heavy bait directly into the branches. Knock it against the wood loudly. When that bait deflects off a branch and falls rapidly right past the face of a hiding fish, instinct takes over. They will snap at it out of pure reflex. It is not a hunger bite, it is an anger bite. Another massive factor people completely ignore is water clarity. When that severe spring cold front blew through, it brought heavy winds. Those winds pounded the shorelines, stirring up mud, clay, and sand. The water that was crystal clear just 2 days ago might now look like chocolate milk. This completely changes how the fish hunt. In clear water, fish rely heavily on their eyesight to track your lure. But in muddy post-frontal water, they cannot see more than a few inches in front of their face. You might be throwing your favorite natural green pumpkin worm, wondering why you cannot get a bite. The truth is, the fish simply cannot see it in the dirty water. You have to adapt your colors immediately. When the water gets heavily stained from a storm, you need to switch to bold, unnatural colors. Black and blue is an absolute classic. Bright chartreuse or neon orange will also work wonders. You need a color that creates a stark silhouette against the muddy background so the fish can actually locate it. Let us talk about finding the absolute warmest water on the lake. After a massive cold front drops the temperature, finding water that is even 1 or 2 degrees warmer can be the difference between a terrible day and the best day of the year. Think about how the sun travels across the sky. In the early spring, the sun shines most directly on the northern banks of a lake or pond. Those northern shorelines are going to absorb more solar energy throughout the day. Now, take it one step further. Look for northern banks that have a dark, muddy bottom or large dark rocks. Dark materials absorb heat much faster than light sand. Imagine standing on black asphalt barefoot on a sunny day versus standing on white concrete. The asphalt is burning hot. The underwater rocks work the exact same way. They absorb the heat from the sun and radiate it into the surrounding water. If you can find a shallow, dark bottom area on the northern side of your lake, you will find fish stacked up, trying to warm their bodies. This leads directly into the timing of your fishing trip. Fishermen love to wake up at 4 in the morning. We love being on the water before the sun comes up, drinking a hot cup of coffee, and watching the mist roll off the surface. It is a beautiful tradition. But if you are doing this the day after a severe spring cold front, you are totally wasting your time. At dawn, the water has been cooling off all night long. It is at its absolute coldest point of the entire 24-hour cycle. The fish are totally stiff and completely inactive. You will freeze your hands off casting for hours with nothing to show for it. Instead of setting your alarm for the crack of dawn, sleep in. Have a nice breakfast. Get to the lake around noon. The period from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon is going to be your golden window. The sun has had several hours to beat down on the shallow water, warming it up just enough to trigger a brief feeding window. Sometimes being lazy is actually the best strategy. We cannot talk about finding fish without talking about bait fish. Fish are simple creatures. They go where the food goes. During a massive cold front, the bait fish are completely thrown off their normal patterns. They are incredibly sensitive to temperature changes. When the shallow water cools down rapidly, large schools of bait fish will pull back to the first major drop-off they can find. They hover in the slightly deeper, more stable water, waiting for the shallows to warm back up. Imagine looking at your fish finder and seeing massive clouds of bait suspended in 15 feet of water, right next to a shallow flat. If you find where the bait retreated to, you have found the dining room. The predatory fish will stage right on the edge of that drop-off, keeping a close eye on the bait. They will use the deep water ledge as an ambush point. If you drag a jig off the shallow flat and let it tumble down the drop-off right into the school of bait, you are almost guaranteed to get your rod bent. Let us talk about vertical fishing. Sometimes the fish are so completely shut down by the cold front that casting out and dragging a bait back is still too much horizontal movement for them. They refuse to chase anything. This is when you need to drop straight down on their heads. Imagine a fish hovering near the bottom, completely lethargic. If a bait swims horizontally past it, the fish ignores it. But if a small, subtle bait slowly descends directly in front of its nose and just hovers there, shaking slightly, it becomes an impossible meal to pass up. This is why techniques like the drop shot rig were invented. You can cast it out, keep the weight completely still on the bottom, and just lightly shake your rod tip. The bait dances in place without moving away from the fish. It stays in the strike zone forever. If you are standing on a dock or sitting in a boat directly over a brush pile, dropping a bait vertically and holding it perfectly still is often the only way to trick a smart, cold fish. Here is a classic scenario you have probably seen 100 times. You walk into the local bait shop on a cold Saturday morning. There are 5 guys standing around the register, heavily bundled up in winter gear. They are all complaining. They are saying the lake is dead. They are saying the cold front ruined the entire weekend. They are talking about packing it up and going to watch sports on television instead. But pay attention to the one quiet guy in the corner of the shop. He is not complaining. He is quietly picking out small finesse hooks and dark-colored plastics. He knows exactly what is going on. He knows that all those complaining guys are about to leave the lake, which means he is going to have the best spots all to himself. He understands that bad weather is the greatest filter in fishing. It filters out the lazy anglers. It filters out the guys who refuse to adapt. If you can learn to be the quiet guy in the bait shop, you will catch more fish in terrible conditions than most people catch on perfect days. We need to clearly define what a massive cold front actually is. Not all weather changes are created equal. If the temperature drops by just 2 or 3 degrees, the fish might barely notice. That is just a normal weather fluctuation. But when we talk about a massive spring cold front, we are talking about a severe shock to the system. We are talking about the temperature plummeting by 15 or 20 degrees overnight. We are talking about heavy rain turning into freezing sleet, accompanied by roaring 30-mile-per-hour winds. That is a massive front. It is a shock that completely rewires the ecosystem of the lake for a few days. You have to gauge the severity of the front to understand how extreme your reaction needs to be. If it is a mild drop, maybe you just slow down your retrieve a little bit. But if it is a massive, shocking drop, you need to completely overhaul your strategy. You need to tie on your smallest baits, find the absolute thickest cover, and prepare for a psychological battle. Let us focus specifically on bank fishermen for a moment. If you do not have a boat, fishing a post-frontal day can feel completely hopeless. You cannot drive around looking for perfectly clear water, and you cannot easily reach the deep drop-offs. You are stuck walking the muddy shoreline. But you actually have a massive hidden advantage. Because you are on the bank, you are forced to fish the shallow cover thoroughly. Remember what we said earlier? The fish did not leave, they just buried themselves in the shallow cover. As a bank angler, you can quietly approach a fallen tree from the land without causing any massive water disturbances like a boat motor would. You can pitch your bait directly into the roots of a tree with ultimate stealth. Imagine creeping up to a muddy bush on the shoreline, gently dropping a small jig right into the center of the branches, and immediately feeling a heavy thump on the line. Bank fishermen often catch the biggest post-frontal fish simply because they are stealthy and incredibly persistent. Another critical detail is your fishing line. When the bite gets extremely tough, fish become incredibly observant. In clear, cold water, a thick fishing line looks like a massive rope attached to your lure. If a fish is already nervous because of the high barometric pressure, seeing a thick rope dragging its food is going to spook it immediately. This is the time to downsize your line. If you normally fish with 15-pound test, drop down to 10 or even 8-pound test fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is practically invisible underwater and sinks quickly. Yes, fighting a big fish out of heavy cover on light line is dangerous and terrifying. It takes serious skill to keep them from breaking you off. But getting a bite and losing the fish is a far better learning experience than never getting a bite at all. You have to risk breaking the line in order to convince these highly pressured fish to actually open their mouths. Small baits and thin line are your ultimate weapons. Let us revisit the wind for just a second, because it is that important. Wind does more than just push bait fish. It actually breaks up the surface of the water. When the sun is beating down from a clear blue sky, the surface of the lake acts like a magnifying glass. The fish feel totally exposed to predators from above. But when the wind blows and creates a heavy chop on the surface, it diffuses that sunlight. It creates a natural roof over the heads of the fish. This makes them feel safe. Imagine sitting in a brightly lit room and someone finally pulls the curtains closed. You instantly relax. The wind is the curtain for the fish. Even if the air is freezing cold, If you can find a bank where the wind is breaking up the surface, those fish will be far more willing to leave their hiding spots and hunt for food. Never hide from the wind on a tough day. Embrace the chop. Put your hood up, tie your shoes tight, and cast directly into the waves. There is a massive misconception about scent during cold fronts. A lot of guys think that because the fish are lethargic, dousing their lures in garlic or shad scent will magically wake them up. While scent can certainly help a fish hold onto a bait longer, it is not a magical dinner bell that will pull them out of a deep sleep. Fish in cold water are not aggressively swimming around sniffing for food like bloodhounds. They are sitting perfectly still, conserving their energy. You can soak your plastic worm in a gallon of garlic oil, but if you cast it 10 feet away from the bush where the fish is hiding, it will never see it, and it will never smell it. Accuracy is 10 times more important than scent. You have to drop that lure right on their actual head. Imagine dropping a perfectly cooked steak on the floor in the next room while you are trying to sleep. You will not get up for it. But if someone puts it directly on your chest, you might take a bite. Accuracy is absolutely everything. The ultimate realization you must have is that catching fish during a terrible spring cold front is not about luck. It is entirely about mechanics and stubbornness. It is about accepting that you might only get 2 or 3 bites all day long. But those 2 bites are often the biggest, fattest fish in the entire lake. When you finally figure out the puzzle, the reward is incredible. You learn to read the shadow lines, you learn to slow your mind down, and you learn to ignore the freezing wind. You stop being a fair weather fisherman, and you become a true predator. You realize that the guy catching fish in the storm is not lucky. He just understands the rules of the game better than the guy sitting in the diner complaining. Every time you face a massive temperature drop, look at it as a pure challenge. The fish are there. The puzzle is waiting to be solved. You just have to be willing to do the hard, uncomfortable work that nobody else wants to do. So, let us bring it all together. If there is one thing you take away from this video, let it be this: stop running away from the bad weather. The biggest plot twist in spring fishing is that the beautiful, warm, bluebird sky is actually your worst enemy, while the dark clouds and dropping pressure are your absolute best friends. We have completely shattered the old myths today. You now know that you must chase the prefrontal wind, avoid the calm leeward banks, and find the shallow, thick cover instead of dragging the deep water. You know that slowing down your retrieve until it feels painful is the ultimate key to forcing a post-frontal strike. This completely changes your approach. You no longer have to pack up your gear when the forecast looks terrible. Instead, you can look at the guy packing up his truck and smile, knowing you are about to have the water all to yourself. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please hit that subscribe button, leave a massive like, and share it with your fishing buddies. Now, I want to hear from you. Are you going to stay on the couch next time the wind howls? Or are you going to brave the storm and catch the fish of a lifetime? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.